I mean, I had to watch ahead. It's Romania Black, and we're on episode 2 of 86. And yeah, after that first episode and me just being bamboozled and mind blown, yeah, I couldn't wait. No. I'm going to make the excuse that I was going to be gone this weekend on a trip and was like, I need to go ahead and record. And after spending like an hour on the discussion in episode 1, I feel like, and we didn't even discover that much. A lot of it was still shrouded in mystery. I'm like, okay, well, if I've spent an hour on that, I need to watch ahead. At least an episode. So yeah, that's what we're doing for episode 2 here. But what a crazy setup. So we don't exactly know at this point the distance between characters. We don't know like where the 86th district is in relation to the other 85 districts. They seem to not be on the map, so who knows where that is. But we do have the idea that Lena, aka Lena, her nickname, is now the handler or controller of the processor units that are the 86. And this is Squadron 1, the Spearhead project, which Spearhead suggests that they are the initial group, but they all are extremely young. So I have so many world building questions, like when did this project start? What's the impetus behind it? Where are the 86? Why are they pigs? What's going on? Why do they look different than all of the other inbred looking people of San Magnolia? Like, what is going on? What about the war with this legion that they think is going to be done in 2 years? Why have they got it timed? There are lots of questions. And I have a feeling the series is going to answer those questions, but it's going to do this sort of like trickle, like leak out of a faucet thing. So all I ask you all is don't tell me anything about the plot. Let me find out on my own, and we'll just cross these bridges when we come to it. But I am going to have moderators checking the comments, which is good, because I have a feeling I'm going to need it, especially with this series. Luckily, it's not like a multi-season show. It's only got 1 season right now, so that's at least somewhat comforting. And it's based off a light novel series, so it's not like an ongoing manga, but I'm so intrigued. Very intrigued indeed. So yeah, so I want to give a special shout out, especially for this week's video, over to Mevelin. Mevelin did a really awesome thing, and they basically told me that there was a fan subgroup that for certain episodes of the season, especially in the latter half, they did a fan translation of the subtitles because the streaming service that I use is not very reliable, and their streaming subtitles are not as accurate. So Mevelin was super nice, and they not only supplied me with the video, but also like burned the subtitles in there for me, because I'm like somewhat competent with tech, but not the best. So I'm really glad that they did that. So thank you, Mevelin. You are amazing. I super appreciate it. All of my love. But yeah, what do we do now? So I'm pretty excited. I hope my dogs act well. Hope my dogs act well. Go lay down. Mama's got to record in episode 86. So I'm really excited, y'all. I have so many questions, and I feel like episode 2, after front loading us with all of that information, now it's going to be like, okay, well, how does Squadron 1, they're not going to trust her right off the bat. Hell no. But how is she going to try to prove herself to them? And is her empathy and kindness enough to break a barrier? What else are we going to find out about the situation? I'm so intrigued. Last episode, my jaw was just like, for most of it. So we'll see what happens, but we're not going to waste any more time. We're going to dive right into episode 2 of 86 and see what we get, y'all. And we're going to do that here in 3, 2, 1, and let's go. Well, this just got awkward. Ha-ha! Ask and you shall receive. I'm very excited about this episode already for a number of reasons. One major reason is that they're already giving us answers. They're giving us answers. There's still a lot that is left in the dark and mystery as far as some of the little nitpicky things, which we're going to address here on Whiteboard Coon. But I do think it's very important to know that this series, what I like about it so far is that it presents a mystery. It presents little things. There's lots of little mysteries being set up, but some of the big world building things that they kind of hooked you in the first episode, being like, well, why are things this way? And then they drop the fascist bomb in this episode, and they're like, well, funny you should say that. But here's the thing. I know I did the whole neo-Nazi discussion in the reaction, but we're gonna take this very seriously because I think some reactors might just be like, they're just a bunch of Nazis, and there's some fascist rhetoric there going on there. Not gonna doubt that, but I think it's a lot more detailed than that. It's a lot. I want to treat it a lot more seriously than that, because I think it deserves to be treated seriously, because a lot of the things talked about in this episode are things we're currently dealing with in our own reality. And I was like, ooh, this just hit real hard, real fast, in a lot of ways. And so what I like about this series is I think a lot of the more serious elements can hit you in waves depending on your circumstance. And it very much relates to the actual show, where we have Lena, who has her own sense of frustrations with the way that the world and her reality is, but she has no freaking clue how it is over there. And we're going to talk about this over in District 86. She's been there once. She said she's been on the battlefield once. And I'm going to guess that was with her father. And there's something about when she looks down at her hand, there's some connection there. So, with that being said, and my dog has taken my toy, there it is. Waha. So, what I want to write up here on Whiteboard Coon is that we have answers. Would you look at that? Answers that we get, and new questions. Because that's what this series does. It gives us new answers and new questions. We haven't really gotten into the characters too much yet. I mean, Lena and Shin are the ones we've gotten into the most. And I like both of them a lot. I like them. I talked about them last episode quite a bit. I like both their characters an awful lot. I like that they both kind of come from this moral center. They both have different aspirations, it seems. And we're going to talk about that in this. But I feel like I want to tread as seriously with the discussion of fascism as is depicted in this story, because the way they depict it is real. The way they depict it is very real. And I was like, ooh. So we're going to talk about this and kind of go over it, because I think it's, we can ha-ha as much as we want about the whole Nazi joke, but the fact is there are Nazis in reality right now, and it's not good. So let's talk about this. One thing I like from the get-go with this episode is the whole thing with the parade. It's an eyeball, which is funny. Like the little symbolism on her neck, it looks like an eyeball. The center looks like an iris. It looks like an eyeball, which is kind of funny, because the one thing they can't do is that they can't see one another. All they can do is hear. So all they can do is hear. They can't really see, sense, or smell, or any other sensory things there. And I think that that's one thing that is so interesting, is that they talk about just the idea, and I guess we need to have a third category over here, of this idea of thematic symbolism stuff over here, because there was a lot in it. So it's the idea of the parade being symbolized as a kind of a sight, a line of sight between the two parties. They have the grid that they go off of and everything there. We established that the 86 district is surrounding the other 85 districts. Isn't that funny? Surrounding it. So we get an idea that 86 is the excluded district, which, going back to episode 1, it's not even on the map. They don't even acknowledge existence. You would think that it's kind of, again, like another series that I'm currently invested in. It's like just the 85 districts are all blocked off from the outside world, kind of like The Village in M. Night Shyamalan's movie. And the idea that the 86 built the wall that surrounds them, it's pretty on the nose. But they're the excluded district that surrounds the other 85, right? So we'll talk about the whole wartime and all that exposition that we get. But I like the idea of that sound is the means of communication. And what I was going to say with that is that it shows the importance of the other senses. Because sound, like the one girl says in class, well, did you go to the battlefield? Did you see it? Did you see what it actually looks like? And Lena's got some tea. She's got receipts. She's like, actually, I have been, Becky, and let me tell you. And I was like, okay. We'll talk about that whole scene, because I'm like, good for you, Aaron Brockovich. Good for you, Michelle Pfeiffer in what's that movie where she's like, it's Coolio has a theme song. Yeah, is it Dangerous Minds? She's like, good for you, Michelle Pfeiffer, but I don't know if your uncle's going to defend you like you think he is. We'll talk about that. But they bring up the point that sound is not good enough. that you have to sometimes see and experience to connect. And I think that's a really good thing to note, because yeah, talking to somebody, we talk, a lot of times about how easy it is for internet trolls to get away with being mean and horrible because there are no consequences to them, and because there's that wall there, right? A lot of times when people troll in comments, if you get on social media and comment, if you call somebody up and comment, it's easier to break up with somebody over the phone because there's no physicality there. You're not standing in front of them. You don't see them. You can't interact with them. It's a voice connecting to a voice. And yes, there is a connection there. And I don't want to disvalue that, because there is an importance with the communication they're doing verbally. And it's building that bridge between them. But it's not enough. They got to see each other. And there has to be more than just voice contact, right? And so a lot of times I feel like in social media or things like that, it's so easy to do things without consequence. It's so easy to dehumanize. It's so easy to not think about things because there is no direct contact you have with that person you're talking bad about. Like oftentimes, if you go up to somebody, it's easy on the internet to be like, oh, you suck. But then are you going to walk up to their face and tell me that they suck? Are you? Maybe, but maybe not, because they could fight you back. And that, there's a wall there where there's no consequence. And that's kind of what's happened with the other districts. They have so segregated and dehumanized and desensitized themselves to the idea of the 86 even being human, that they're totally fine with them dying because there's no connection between them. We're going to talk about that, because she talks about them becoming a citizen of the Republic again. And I'm like, wait a minute. Hold up. So we're going to talk about that here in just a second. The flowers. Bring the flowers dying. The flowers seeming to be a symbol of her faith in the country itself, right? Because it's sand magnolia, and those are magnolias on the counter there. So she keeps changing them out to show that she's trying to support her nationality, her nation. But the more she interacts with the 86 and the more she realizes, how bad the situation is, the more it seems that she's losing her faith in the country that she's currently working with alongside the 86. So I think that's interesting. I like that. But yeah, so I like the back and forth that we develop in this series, where we get something from her perspective and how she's handling it in her world, and then we get it from his world and his perspective, and we see that back and forth, and we see her reaction and his reaction, right? I like it. It works really, really good. And here's the thing with the flowers. She ignores the flowers. She sticks them in the vase and ignores them, and they slowly die. But it's not like, you may say, oh, well, since she became the handler for the Spearhead Division, Unit 1, they've died since then. But they've been dying all along. The little petals were falling off in episode 1 before she was even assigned to Spearhead. It's like her faith was shaken with the system the moment she became a major and the moment she took on, being a handler herself. So she could have been changing out these flowers to honor her father's memory, or to, show favoritism to her country before she was a handler. But once she became a handler, suddenly that favoritism and that nationality, that nationalist attitude slowly starts to wane as she gets to know the 86 and realize they're all just people. Also, it makes sense that now that we know that the 86 are an excluded district, it makes sense why there are so many. Because it's like, here's your 85 districts, and over here around it is the 86. So there's people from everywhere, right? And they've just built this wall to help keep out the Legion, and they're fighting around the wall to keep the Legion from entering. So we're going to talk about that too, and kind of, what goes on with that. I want to get past this intro though. Get past this intro. The intro is luckily not too spoilerific, I don't believe, although we may be surprised about that later. So now it makes sense. It makes sense now with the database of all the people. They're all the members of 86 in that database, right? I don't trust the uncle, if I'm being perfectly honest. I don't trust the uncle. I don't feel like he's going to defend his niece as well as she thinks he's going to. He was willing to put her in a situation where she could commit suicide. I don't know. I feel like the dad and the brother, maybe they saw the eye to eye, maybe they didn't. I feel like the dad's death is connected somewhat to all of this and to her going to the battlefield for the first time. I don't know. There are the 3 that are in the field of chrysanthemums. I don't know who they are. We'll find out who those 3 are, I guess, at some point in this story. I don't know. Interesting. But then we have like the stoplight and all of this. Okay. So we have Sheen. We have the group there, and they're all like, you know, did you forget the new handler? Okay, so his name is, we find out his actual name, Shania, right? It's Shania Nozen. Yeah, so the older man, Aldrich, he calls him by his first name. It's like when you get in trouble and your parent or your teacher stuff calls you by your full name. That's when you know you're in for it. And he's like, you did it again, you bastard. Old man Aldrich's gonna go off again. So Aldrich seems like he's been there for a while. So we find out that this whole battle situation and the districting has been going on for 9 years. 9 years of the 86 district. We find out that Sheen has been in Squadron 1 for 5 years, which is the longest. And most are 4 years. And now Lena, we find out that she is the 6th handler. But we know they went through the 5th and 6th handler rather quickly. So I am assuming that in those 5 years or in the 9 years, they've had around the same handler for a long time. So I'd be curious to know about the other 5 handlers other than Lena and their history. I wonder if Sheen will eventually tell her about the other 5 handlers. I don't know. But yeah, we get him being like, you need to quit smashing your machines on every mission. So it seems like Aldrich is a mechanic, and they have like this little hangar where they keep like fixing the machines over and over again. And they just keep doing that. He's like, they have weak legs, so don't push them. He's like, we don't have any more spare parts. We can't repair it until the next batch of them comes. So I wonder how long the batches are. So questions we have is how long between batches of new equipment. The way he talks makes it seem like a new batch has came before. So maybe that's the case. I don't know. And he talks about Fido. We do find out what Fido is. Yay. Fido is that little orange machine that goes. So we find out that Fido, which is like a machine that aptly named, fetches supplies, which we'll talk about here in a little bit. But they did not bring back Cujo's machine, right? And he talks about because of that, they didn't have the spare parts. And he says, Aldrich makes the comment being like, yeah, it would have worked if we got one of his. So yeah, so basically, Cujo had 129 days of their service left. So they had less than a year left, kind of like Sheen. So the question is, did Sheen enlist in the army and join the same time as Cujo did? He's got a whole damn box full of tags. I'm assuming there's been a lot of people die that he might have joined with at the time. And then Aldrich says, would you be comfortable using spare parts from a machine that someone died in? I'm like, I don't think Sheen would care because... And then he like points at the thing. He's like, are you serious? He seems to suggest, he's like, it's a little too late to ask that. Got it, Undertaker. So yeah, the little emblem says Undertaker. So that leads me to believe that Sheen inherited the Undertaker title from someone else. So the Undertaker title. The Undertaker, was it originally someone else? That's a fair question too. Did that title belong? Did Sheen have a brother or a mentor that was originally the Undertaker, and then when they died, he took over for them and took their machine from them? Maybe, perhaps. It almost seems to be that way. And then again, the question is, which I won't write it up here because we've had that question from last episode, but the brother's voice, is brother the one that was the original Undertaker? And they keep waiting to hear his voice, like when the comrade dies, maybe? Because they talk about hearing voices. I don't know. And so he talks about saying Cujo was lucky to die in a unit with you there. You take the other processors too, to remember their names. So yeah, which sounds like this thing looks like it's been pieced together and repurposed over and over again. So yeah, it's very possible that the Undertaker was originally someone else, and Sheen just took their name and kept up their duty of taking in the tags from people who have died. So I like that Sheen doesn't trash talk Lena. He just says it's fine. He's very indifferent about Lena right now, which for a character like Sheen, indifference is maybe better than being mad or dismissive of them. And so he talks about them calling every day, which is rare for a Republic soldier. What would you call an ordinary person? And then that's when Aldrich kind of says, a little sarcastically, they must live a hard life, the poor thing. And then we see all these names. We see Mosh, Rins. We see Miria. We see Cujo. We see Haku. There's just a bunch of tags. There's dozens of them. Like all these people have died and he keeps mementos of them. Which is kind of like he keeps his box of all the ones like Niu, Yui, all the ones that have died. Kind of like he keeps track of the dead, like she keeps track of the dead. She puts the numbers in her reports, and he keeps track of them through the tags because he doesn't have any other way to store that data. So it's interesting that we see both of them. We see both Lena and Shin keeping track of the dead. We see that with both of them. Cool. So yeah. So we see that comparison there. Then we see like everything looks beautiful, like the countryside, like there's flowers growing, there's train tracks. It's a week later. And so there's like flowers there. They have the sixth handler and it's her, and they've drawn her as this big pig woman, which is hilarious. And it shows like him reading over by the statue in front of them playing ball. And he says that he reads to take his mind off of things. When he wants to distract himself, that's when he reads. But I thought initially he read out there in public with everyone because he wanted to kind of keep watch and observe without seeming obvious. But he's doing the very coffee shop thing of you people watching while you're just pretending to do work, but you're also kind of people watching at the same time. I mean, we've all done it, right? It's not just me, right? The one thing is he reads that book. I don't know what book he's reading, and you can't really tell the name of it. So, but that cat follows him around, right? I'm wondering if the white bandana is from anyone, that maybe he got it from someone. I don't know. And then so they get the shipment in. It's a big hall. We'll have a party. And there's like all this food and stuff. So interesting. They have canned goods. They have like a pig that they can roast. They have all this food. So my question that kind of goes to this point over here is where the food is from. What's interesting is that they get all this fresh fruit and food and eggs, and like that's a damn pig, and like canned goods and stuff. They get like all this authentic food, but inside the district they talk about how it's all artificial. Nobody has like any real authentic food anymore. So you would think that like the real food would be harder to come by and would be, much more valuable than the commodity stuff that the district people are getting. So how does that work? Like is District 86, like, is it self-sustaining itself and growing its own food and doing its own thing? And then the inside is just doing its own thing? Or are they supplying? Because they don't seem to be treating District 86 like people, so why would they get better food? I don't know. I am curious to know if we find out more about that. I feel like we will. It's like, this isn't bullying. Don't tell Sheen. Okay. Interesting. So, does Sheen not know where they're getting this food from? And then Theo says the weather report has changed and rain's coming. And it says jammers too, and the into flags or whatever they are. In about 2 hours, the radar will be down. So yeah, it shows like the city and everything, and all of those machines they have. It's all like grown in 9 years. It's like taken over, and there's all the old towers. No shepherds this time. They'll just try and overwhelm you. Okay. So he says, no shepherds this time. Just sheep. A duck hunt then. So it's interesting. There's a lot of terms here. I don't really want to know what they all mean because I feel like we're going to get them. But we have the idea of shepherds and sheep. And we have the idea of the duck hunt. Like they're trying to find like a needle in the haystack maybe, or trying to hunt down the ducks from the sky. There's also the low and growl wolves, which are types of legion, which are the enemy drones, which we'll talk about. But it's so weird to think that like the code word of when it rains is that the enemy is coming, and they send in these moths that are jammers. So they jam the signal, they jam anything that could possibly get in the way, like they're swarming, trying to. What's weird is it just seems like it's on a cycle. Like, we'll talk about this with the history lesson, but it seems like it's just on this endless loop. An endless loop until they all go out of whack, right? An endless loop until they're done, and then they go off for a while, and then they'll come back. Like, just endlessly. It's so weird. Which would kind of make sense that they're like AI. They're just doing things on a timed loop, right? And it's like, okay. And he tells them what they're going to be doing. What the squadron's goal is. So he says that he basically says like where they're going to go, and they're going to go to point 304. And the funny thing is they talk about how old the machinery is, how cramped it is, how cold it is. When the moths come in the sky, they block out the sun and make things, hard to navigate through. And then you cut to like the history lesson with the professor, and he's like, they have state-of-the-art equipment. And it's like maybe 9 years ago, but it's not been maintained. It's not been maintained. Nobody cares. So they talk about, and the question is, did they care to begin with, And so he's like, we've already deployed. We already know it's coming. Because the thing about it is, she can't tell that the Legion had already came. She doesn't know that there are signals in their world that show them that they're approaching so they can get ready. She just goes into a room, turns on the computer screen, and boop, there they are. And they're like, yeah, we've known for the last 2 hours that they're here. So we've been readying ourselves. And that's kind of that disconnect, right? Because she just thinks, oh, well, you're just automatically ready to go. Anytime she said in this episode, oh, it looks like you're having fun, I'm like, they're like dying out here, and it's terrifying. I don't know if I describe it as fun, but she doesn't know because she's only been to the battlefield once, but she's not actually entered the fight. And man, the battle sequence of the legions, like it shows how shiny and new they are. Like it's crazy. And they go through all the different types, right? That what are the bugs things that they say there? They have the Low's main gun is twice as powerful as theirs. It can kill you fast. And it says the electronic disruption integ fleeg is just like the flies that they disrupt any other like possible communication, right? And they also like they intercept visuals. So when she sends him the visual of their location, he's like, don't send us visuals. The little moths can intercept that and use it against us. Just talk to us instead. That's what he meant by that. I'm glad that none of them died in this episode because I was really worried about that. But the battle scenes were really intense with this. And we do get some ideas of who is who, right? But the battle scenes are really intense. And they make you kind of nervous at all times that somebody's going to die from it. But we get some of the names. I know we get Black Dog and we get Laughing Fox. Laughing Fox is the blonde. Black Dog, I'm assuming, is the one with the funky haircut. He kind of looks a little bit like Cujo. And Snow Wolf. So, yeah, Snow Witch Reload. And she's like Snow Witch Roger. Now, okay, the thing about it is, Snow Witch, she has, I want to know more about her. I'm going to put her down here because she has white hair and blue eyes, but she's called Snow Witch, so she's an outcast for some reason. My guess is that she, maybe her parents, one of her parents, her mom might have not been white-haired and blue-eyed, and maybe she didn't want to go and leave her mom behind. And so she stayed and was like, no thanks, I want to be with my mom. And then now she's part of the 86. Because she looks exactly like them. Or she looks like the Albas. So, which is, you know, the Albas, you could say it's connected to Albians. You could say it's connected to Aryans. I'm like, it's a little bit on the nose. Just a wee bit. But I love in the battle scenes that they show the moths flying air, the reconnaissance moths. They show how sleek the Legion robots' designs are. And then you just see how warped and disgusting the robots of the 86 unit is, because they're just in disrepair. They're just a ragtag group, literally. And so then, yeah, we see from his perspective the idea of how they fight in the battle, and then we go back and see it from her perspective. So yeah, I'm going to get through this battle. I love the battle scenes a lot. I'm glad nobody died. And then as soon as they leave, then it actually starts to like rain a little bit as the swarm is leaving. And then they all just like open their robots up and watch them go. Like, just another day, risking our lives and nearly dying to fight these drones. Like you do. Spearhead. So that's the group, the target group. And then we come back to Lena's perspective. So yeah, okay. So let's go to this lesson here where we get our teacher here. Yes, and Lena throughout this whole lesson is just like, she's sitting there biding her time, being like, I can't wait to just tell everybody how wrong this man is. Okay, so we find out 9 years ago, in the year 2139, we find out all that's going on. The Republic of San Magnolia. So I want to go through this history here. We have 9 years ago, we said war was declared by the neighboring empire of Gilead, which, yikes, everything is just... So the empire talked about that war was declared on San Magnolia. Okay. Now, at this point, they talk about a lot of things in this, saying that they began their invasion with the Legion, these autonomous combat machines, but we estimate that, in fact, Jihad had been wiped out by its own out-of-control Legion 4 years ago. Okay, so 9 years ago was the war, right? So we get this timeline started. So we have 9 years ago, war declared. Okay. And they make this thing called Legion. But then we estimate that 5 years of war pass. 5 years of war pass. And at the 4th year, 4 years ago. Oh, they say, 4 years ago, that Legion has wiped out its own country. So that makes a lot of sense for a number of reasons of why there are people manning the 86 and not just mindless drones like the Legion has. Because it sounds like that the other 85 districts, that San Magnolia was afraid that the same thing would happen if they tried to fight fire with fire. Their belief is that Jihad is no longer operating under its own authority. It's been completely wiped out by its own Legion. The AI went amok, wiped out its own people, Terminator style, and then has continued this cycle of attacking the 85, basically attacking San Magnolia over and over again, because that's all it knows to do. It's wiped out its own country, and now it's just attacking San Magnolia constantly, right? But for 5 years, they did declare war. Now, at some point in this, because we established that Shin has been in combat a year before that. Okay? So Shin's been in contact a year before they figured out that Legion supposedly wiped out the other country. So I can understand why San Magnolia does not want to put automatic drones in the robots themselves, because they'd be afraid, like, well, we just saw how Legion got out of control and wiped out its own country. We don't want to make AI automated robots to do the same here. That would be bad. But, you know, kudos for them for realizing the flaw in that strategy. But, so our way around it, they're like, they say, given that Legion have an operating time of 50,000 hours or 6 years, they will completely shut down in about 2 years. So they suspect that, this is all just hypothetical, they suspect that in 2 years, so we have the present time, so they suspect that 4 years ago, the last set of Legion were built. The last set of Legion were built before Giad was destroyed. And so they suspect that because of that, this is the present time. And then in 2 years, this last group will shut down. So my guess is that during this initial period, and the dad of Lena may have been involved, my suspect, and my dogs are playing, so you have to excuse them, but my suspect is that during those first 5 years, maybe Lena's dad was involved and they confiscated one of the Legion drones, realized its runtime, and we're like, okay, it's ran for 6 years, then it shuts down. So as long as we hold out 2 more years now, then this whole set will wipe out. The one thing about that makes me a little bit nervous is I'm like, well, how do they know? There's no certainty. They're just telling everybody, oh yeah, you got 2 years and then we're done. Just you wait. But I'm like, there's no way to know for certain, right? Have any of them communicated with Giad, right? How do they know? How do they know that there isn't a factory endlessly supplying them that's just running on its own without stopping? How do we know the AI isn't doing that? How do we know the AI is not making more Legion? How do we know? So either they found a way to find out that Giad's been wiped out, but he says they don't know for sure. So either they found a way to know that for sure, or the city's been wiped out and this is just the remnants of the Legion going on loop. And they know for a fact the city is gone, the factories are gone. It's just this last group of Legion just going on an endless cycle over and over again. The thing about it is like, why would you not? I guess the point is, if it were their own people, the Albas, in the robots themselves fighting the Legion, you would think that they would be fixing the robots, the juggernauts, repairing them constantly, upgrading them. And you would also think that rather than just sitting out and waiting for 2 years for no reason, that they would just go hurry up and destroy the Legion bots. Like, go ahead and destroy them all. If you know there's not a second wave coming, just wipe this wave out and then don't worry about it. But because it's members of the 86 in the robots and the juggernauts, they don't care. They're like, yeah, we've got to make sure that the Legion don't overwhelm the 86 and make it inside the walls. We got to make sure that doesn't happen, because that could be bad. But we're not really going to worry about repairing the juggernauts or making sure the 86 are okay or helping them out any, because we've just got to stall for 2 years, and these guys have just got to do their job for 2 years, and that's it. And it's like, the crazy thing is that it's sort of put 86 in a bad situation, because we find out now, because I was like, well, why is the 86 fighting for them? Why don't they just say no? Because then they'll die. Like, that's the answer, is that the 86, they have no choice. They have been forced to fight or die. There's nowhere for them to go. They either have to fight or die, and they have to just keep it up for 2 years, or else there's no future for them at all. So it's like, well, do you risk, which the sad thing is that they know how prejudiced San Magnolia is towards them. So it's kind of this like, you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. You either fight to stay alive, but you know that there's a very good chance that after these 2 years, they're not going to take you back in. They're going to keep you outside that wall. And you're just going to be able, you're just going to leave you to fend for yourself. So there's a very good chance that could happen. It's interesting. But he says there, and he's like constant looking, he's like, you new soldiers will only have 2 more years before, so these are all new recruits before the war ends. But during that time, we hope you'll do your best to fulfill your duties. And none of them are paying attention. He's like, none of them are paying attention. He's just like, they're all just kind of like goofing off. They don't treat this seriously because they're so disconnected. And we see what the juggernauts look like in their prime, right? We see the magazine. We see the gun, the frequency blade, the machine gun. It says the Republic of San Magnolia Army Unmanned Tactical Vehicle, the meat juggernaut. And it says specifications. It's manufactured, has all the specifications on there. Like, it looks all fancy. He's like, they're vastly superior autonomous units compared to the Legion, which they're not. And not one fatality has taken place since their introduction. And Lena's like, no, people have died. And everyone looks at them. And I like that the one guy's looking up at her like, you about to say something? And she's like, yeah, I'm a handler and I'm going to spill the tea. Get ready. She's like, actually, I've come to like reveal all the truths. Thank you. And so they all stand up to recognize her. And she says, I'm going to tell you the real history of the Republic. I love the teachers just shook like the fudge. 9 years ago, the Republic's regular army was brought to the point of collapse in just 2 weeks by the Legion's overwhelming firepower. So the government went on to make 2 decisions. So the first was withdrawal to the 85 administrative districts. And the other was to pass the Special Wartime Peace Preservation Act. The law stripped citizenship and all rights for anyone who did not have silver hair and eyes like the Alba. So at one point, the Alba and everybody else in their world in San Magnolia were all like a vast, different group of people. But some original group of folks with silver hair and silver eyes decided, no, let's just hide all of us within the 85 administrative districts, just a big enough area to house them and make everybody else. But the way they phrase it, like the Peacetime Preservation Act, which is basically just a horrible segregation, is hilarious in how ridiculous it is. So basically they just segregated all the silver-eyed peeps together. Which means you guys are all probably related. You cool with that? I mean, I know what it's supposed to represent, but it's just funny because it's so specific that I'm like, y'all are probably related. I don't blame her for not wanting to marry into that. And then it took the citizenship and rights from the others. Which, in Shin and the other 86 members' case, with the exception of Aldrich, with the other members, they were probably only like 9 or 10 at the time. So they didn't, they couldn't really do much about it. They were just kids, right? When their citizenship was stripped from them. And then she's like, they would no longer be considered humans and would instead be kept in carefully monitored internment camps outside the 85 districts. So they were basically sent to concentration camps. Basically. Internment camps, you call it what you want. But they were sent to... Now, it says carefully monitored. I don't really believe that at this point, it's been 9 years. I don't feel like it's carefully monitored anymore. I feel like it's monitored, but not carefully, right? Not enough. I think they've kind of given up on that at this point. Or at least... They still said, I guess they can still fly down there because they do have air access. But yeah, carefully monitored camps outside the 85 districts. So interesting, right? And due to that, as you're all aware, they are now supposedly the empty area became known as District 86. They were forced to build the Fortress Grand Mur and the wall isolating the 86th district, and to pilot the juggernauts. So yeah, she's like, they're basically doing all our shit for us. There are humans inside of them. But because the ones inside the 86 aren't quote unquote human, we say they're autonomous. But they're not. They're surrounded by Legion and fighting. Yep. And the news you see every morning isn't true. People are dying. Dozens can die in a single battle. And then someone says, but they're not human, right? And then he shows this thing in here that says, it's this book that says the 86 are, in other words, humanoid pigs that failed to evolve. The M1A4 Juggernaut developed by our military are considered unmanned. And then we have this weird picture of a pig becoming a person regarding development of the Legion and in warfare and non-combat. About the declaration of war by Jihad and its destructive. Along with Jihad, Magnolia War was one of the something in political history. It resulted in the extension of something, a communist movement, to eventually blah, 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 blah. And it says warfare with non-combatants. So yeah. And the scary thing about this is, it's only been 9 years. It's only been a decade. That's all it's been. And all these kids think this is true. Like, they weren't that old when they were indoctrinated with this. Like, they were probably 5 or 6 when this all started. Maybe even 7 or 8. But because all they've been taught is that the 86 people they probably grew up with, people that were probably around when they were children, that were separated from them, they've been taught that they're less than human. And you think to yourself, that sounds really crazy. That doesn't sound realistic. But the fact of the matter is, it's happening right now in our own country. Like, I'm from the US, and let me tell you, without getting political as much as I can, there are people right now in our government that try to pass laws banning books they deem as propaganda because they teach about equality. Banning books that teach about people's sexualities and orientations because they want to make them lesser than human. And that way it's okay when they get hurt. And that's happening now. So whenever I see this scene, I'm like, oh my God, this is real. And the scary thing is how effective it is. Like, there was a story the other day in my country where people were like segregating certain books because they talked about, equality of people regardless of race or gender. And I was like, oh my God, like that's this shit, And the sad thing is that a lot of people are trying to indoctrinate children to have, this idea of segregation and people not being equal. And I'm like, whoa, that's dangerous. And that's what's happening here. It's this danger and you think it's so stupid. You're like, well, we just saw, the 86 district. They're not pig people. They're people just like these people are. But that's the thing. They don't see, and they're not allowed to interact with them. And because there's no interaction, because there's no sight, because there's no touch, because there's no feel, because there's no smell or taste, all you do is hear what they say, but you can't physically see them to prove their existence. There's not that understanding. And so it's easier to dehumanize them and demean them. And that's insane to me. And it's made like a joke here because you're like, well, who would believe that these people are pigs? In the past, it's been highly effective. And just saying, to quote history, millions and millions of people died because of a mentality like that. So it's real. And it's very effective. And it's terrifying. And I was like, oh my God. So yeah, and Lena's just like, you uncultured masses. And she's like, they are human. I fight with them every day. And then the one girl says, well, you say you fight with them, but have you ever gone to the battlefield? And I like how old Becky in the stands is saying that, like Lena wouldn't have the answer. Like, she'd be like, well, I've not been to the battlefield. Well, see, you don't know. But then she drops a truth bomb like a badass, and she's like, oh, actually, I have been, Becky. I've been there. I have once. And everybody looks around like, oh. And that's when the MP gets up because he's like, oh shit, she has receipts. Oh no, the woman has proof. I went to the battlefield, but I didn't fight. And she's like, the only ones who risk their lives in the battle are the 86. And I love how she phrases that. She's like, I went to the battlefield, but I didn't do anything because that wasn't my job. So I feel like she went with her dad before. I feel like that's what's happened. And so she's just telling them. And that whole thing with her hand, I want to know what the hand signal is. I feel like we're going to find out with the hand what's going on. But yeah. Yep, people we stripped the rights from. And I love that the one teacher's like, oh my God, I told you not to say anything that sounds like you've sided with them. So, that's interesting. Like you've sided with the funny thing is they treat them like they're the enemy, but they're the ones saving your asses. So it's like, what? Now, my question is, the suicides, quote unquote, were they suicides, or were they people taken out because they knew too much, or because they sympathized too much? Did the Undertaker reach them and they sympathized too hard? And so were they committing suicide, or did the military take them out because they were going to spread too much misinformation? I'm a little bit worried about Lena because she seems so like, nepotism's great. I know I just talked about anti-fascism, but good thing I got friends on the other side. And so I'm like, I don't know. Her uncle seems okay, but do I think that he would protect her against his country? Nope. I feel like she could die an unfortunate death and he'd be like, oh no, mama, your kid died. I guess it's just me and you. You know. This whole idea of siding with them. And she's like, what does our nation's flag stand for? And he's like, what? And she says they stand for freedom, equality, brotherhood, justice, and nobility. Irony of all ironies, right? Yeah, the things that should be recognized between her and the 86 that no one else is wanting to recognize. How about that? Yep. And then he's like, well, those only apply to humans. The 86 look human, but they aren't. And the way she looks at them, she's like, I'm not the one misinforming the students, mother trucker. You are. Like, I feel Lena's frustration. I feel her frustration being like, are you freaking kidding me? Nobody wants to believe what the truth is right in front of them. And then she sees the one MP is gone. She's like, And she's like, look, they're teenage boys and girls just like us. But they don't enjoy entertainment and luxuries the way that we do. They can't laugh innocently the way that we do. We can't leave them all alone. We can't see them, but if we listen carefully, we can hear the voices of these nameless soldiers. Even apart, we look at the same stars. I love that. I love that she gets that inspirational speech and then Annette's like, really? You told the new recruits that? That's a bit bold. Yeah, so I like her speech to them. I don't know what good it will do, but I do like the idea that she's like, the sad thing is when she talks about them all being teenage boys and girls like her, what that means is that at the beginning when this all started, all of the older people were put into the juggernauts first. And they were the first ones to go, is the idea. What I'm afraid of is the idea that there seems like there's still something we don't know about this whole situation. There's still a twist that I feel is yet to come. We've gotten the main gist of it now, but I feel like there's still a twist yet to come because it would make sense if 9 years ago when they started all this, they started with the older people first, like the parents, the elder siblings, they put them in the juggernauts first. Then when they died, they just started going through the next round. Be like, oh, you're old enough to be in the juggernaut? Okay, you come with us. Now you go. I feel like in the internment camps, there's where all the people are being kept. And as they get older, they get summoned and drafted to be put into the juggernauts at a certain age. And just like Sheen and this group have been. And then when they die off, they go pluck up another round and put them in the juggernauts too, which is disgusting and terrifying. But the thing that bothers me is like, well, what if they run out of people? What if they all die before the 2 years are up with the Legion and all the people in the juggernauts die off? Well, then what are they going to do? Which I feel like there's a twist with that. We don't know something that's yet to come. Oh no. Lena is far too casual about her everything being fine and being like, oh, my uncle will be totally great. I'm fine. And being like, I'm not going to, what does she say here? She says, it's not going to change the Republic's foolish mistake. And that's when she is like a freaking schoolgirl around Undertaker, around Shin. She's like, oh, they're like, well, you have an elevated heart rate. She's like, don't get too attached. And she talks about him like he's like the best thing since sliced bread. And it's like, oh my God. And that's when we cut back to her noticing that the reports are exactly the same. He's just been turning in the same report over and over again. So we see the reports here, and of course nobody checks them, so nobody cares if they look exactly the same. But all he's been doing is changing the dates. And I wonder if there's a special reason why he kept the same report, if he was really just being lazy, or if like that specific first report is one that he repeated for a reason, like if that's the one where his brother or friend died in, the original Undertaker, because I don't think Shin is the original Undertaker. I think he's taken the mantle up from someone else. And that's when she sees all the reports are the same. And at this point, she's already abandoned the flowers, right? Also, we see that some of her dolls have changed, which is fun and interesting. And she's put the book up, the military strategy book up. Okay. And it seems like she's excited to talk to the crew. Like she gets all excited to talk to them again. Meanwhile, we come back to the base and they're playing Shoot the Tin Can. And we see like the old abandoned school building that they're all staying at. We see like the lights and monitors set up. It seems like in the 86 camp, they originally had a setup to monitor them, and then as time has gone by, they've just kind of abandoned it and been like, you guys are going to keep fighting for us, right? Okay. And so meanwhile, they have like the food that they're eating, and then they talk about what's his face? We'll get his name in a second. They talk about the decision making with Lena. And so they're like, well, the original strategy she had would have worked if they had left from the point originally she thought they left from, but they'd already moved ahead and she had already planned ahead and did a different move. And I like the one guy says, like, her answer was so textbook it makes me want to throw up. Like she's treating everything strategy-wise like a battleship game. And they're like, this is not like a game that you can predict so easily. Like, it's war. And you can't just predict war like a board game. So they're talking about the differences between her strategies and the ones they had to come up with on the fly. Right? But she's not just some special royal, spoiled rich kid. Yeah, I like that they established that she at least has some prowess as a military strategist. Raiden, that's his name with the spiky hair. And so they each take turns firing the shot. But how long can she keep up? Like, how is she going to be good? And then we see the Snow Witch, and she gives him more bread. And it says, Anju, I'll help you. Okay, so Anju is her name. Interesting. I'm curious. It seems like the Laughing Fox likes the Snow Witch, which is cool. I wonder why she's there, again, because she seems like she would be one of the Albas. But my theory is that one of her parents was not silver-haired and blue-eyed, so she just stayed. So Anju is her name. I want to know about Anju more. Want to know more about her. And so she asks if the book is good. He's reading a different book now, isn't he? It's a different color, yeah. And he's like, when I'm thinking about something else, it stops me from focusing on it. And she's like, oh, I see. It's always a lot of stress for you, huh? And then they say it's Shin's turn. And he doesn't even get up. He just takes out the gun and fires it. And they're like, well, that was pointless. So he's really good. Like, he's a really good combatant. So he's clearly good at being a soldier. And so that's when we hear Lena get on the line. Everybody's like, oh, it's her. And of course, I like the one girl like smiles, but I like that they're all like, and it's so, they know that she's speaking from such a place of privilege, and they're expecting her to speak down on them, and they know that she doesn't know what life for them is like, right? And she's like, oh, you all seem to be having a lot of fun. Sorry. And they're like, yeah, we were having a lot of fun, and you interrupted it. There's a group of them. And so, of course, Sheen's the one that talks to her. And she scolds him. So what does he say here? It's like leading, I don't know what his book says. But she scolds him for doing the same reports. And she's like, I want to analyze them, so do them properly. I like that everybody's kind of like, there were no schools in the camps. So she can hear them. So he's the one that talks for the group, but she can hear all of them, which is interesting. He's like, there were no schools in the camps. So they were originally at an internment camp, and then they got moved out to this base. Okay. And they weren't taught there. So they can't, so he's like, I don't really do reading and writing, but he's reading the book. So is he really reading the book, or is he just taking his mind off of things, looking at the words? I feel like Sheen is self-taught, and I feel like Sheen may be a little bit older than them. So maybe he had learned to read and write before they went to the camps. But that's something too, the idea that none of them were given proper educations at the camps. So they don't exactly know how to do anything involving reading and writing. That's a really good point. That's why it's like all through sound, they don't have to read any visuals given to them. They just have to respond through communication. That makes a lot of sense too. And she's like, and then one girl says, well, it's not like he's good at it. It's more that he's lazy. And then she realizes what she said. And it was like, oof. Like, she's like, I done goofed. I ratted him out without realizing it. So that's when she asks him to send him the sessions. And he's like, well, footage from the gun camera. She's like, no, I want written reports. And the one girl's like, sorry. And he's like, no, it's fine. And so that's when he kind of motions back to Aldrich and says, no, it's fine. Just go back there. It's okay. Says your records are especially valuable. So that's when he heads over to Aldrich. And she's like, so help me, please. And she's like, no, I'm about the same age as all of you. And they're like, yeah, we are all young. And so most of us were all in our 4th year, except for Sheen. He's his 5th year. And she's like, oh, so you have only one more. So you're down to 1 year with your term. And then she says, is there anything you plan on doing when you leave the army and become a Republic citizen again? Somewhere you want to go or want to see? So the thing about it is that apparently their terms are 6 years. And so it's like, basically, once the 6 years are up, they get to become a citizen again. But I'm like, how does that work? Because this whole entire country, or these 85 districts that are put together, don't believe you're human. So how do you get citizenship? And I can't imagine someone making it the 6 years and going back inside the 85 districts and just automatically being like, well, welcome back. How's it going? We think you're a human pig, but would you like some tea? Like, how is that going to work? Like, I don't think that would, like, do you get to go to a special camp in District 86 where you get rights and nice things, but you can't go in the other 85 districts? Like, that part is interesting. Like, I don't imagine, based on the war climate with these individuals, that there are a lot that have made it to that point. Does Lena not realize that nobody's made it to that point? That is a big question. Like, what do we do with them? And she says, and he's like, I've never thought about it. And she's like, I see. The thing of it is, I don't know if Lena doesn't know what happens, or if there is no end of service, or if Sheen has said that he's not quitting service until the next 2 years are up. If he's like, no, I'm going to stay with these people until the end of our 6 years of war. I'm not going to leave them. I don't know. It seems like Sheen is not planning on leaving after his term is up. He's going to stay there with them, but she may not know that. She's like, oh, you need to start thinking about it now. You might come up with something. And I feel like, she's like, I'm sure it'll be fun. And he's like, yeah, no, you don't understand. And his smile there as he goes in there, he's like, oh yeah, sure, I'll think about it. You may be right. There's a twist laid in here. There's a twist still yet to be revealed, right? There's something that Lena doesn't know about the end of term, or however that works. Like, there's something that's not being said. I don't know. So it sounds like whenever this started 9 years ago, they're like, well, if you fight for us for 6 years, well, I guess knowing the timeline of that 6 years of service would be interesting, because what it sounds like is that they told them that if you serve for 6 years leading up to when the robots are supposedly going to be done, then you'll get your citizenship back, which is why Cujo was excited, because he didn't have that long left. But there has to be more to it. There's something else that we're not being told, and I'm excited to find out what that is. But yeah, so Lena is all about the woke agenda and changing people's minds and being like, yeah, we're all humans in this. Why y'all being a bunch of fascist idiots? And there's a lot more to this than I think Lena even knows about. So yeah, she's fresh-eyed and bushy-tailed and doesn't quite understand probably what all that's been going beyond the scenes. I'm sure she's relying on what her father's told her and doesn't know the rest of the story. And maybe Sheen and the others know a little bit more than they're letting on right now. I would want to see what the camps are like. I would want to see, you know, what's this term to do with? Like, what's the contingency plan once the thing is over, the war is over, what we're going to do then? Because it seems really, you know, you have an entire population that has been demoralized into being these monsters and dehumanized. If you knew that this, you know, originally, I could see why people did that, you know, I could see why people did that at the beginning, because they didn't know how long this war was going to last. So the demoralizing and dehumanizing to make people not care so much during the war made sense from a horrible standpoint. But the thing is, once they found out the Legion's probably going to run out in 2 more years or in 6 years from that time period, why didn't they start changing the narrative? You know, you could make it to be like, oh, well, if you've convinced people they're monsters, well, hell, why don't you just be like, oh, we just discovered they're actually the heroes, and we should be rooting them on and helping them in battle and trying to make them do well. And then when the battle's over, we'll welcome them back in with open arms. No, what I think is going to happen is when the Legion's over, they're going to euthanize all of them. That's what I think is going to happen. I think when the war's over, they are going to euthanize the 86 and get rid of all of them somehow. And that way, then they can't tell what happened. But I don't know how they could manage that, or if they're saving all the good weapons for that point, or if they've been saving all the upgraded weapons in case if the 86 were destroyed and they had to implement them as a safety measure. And then when it's over, they're like, oh, what are we going to do with all these machines? I guess we'll just go destroy the 86. I don't know, but I have theories. I have suggestive thoughts about all of this, but I want to know more. So, and I've literally talked for an hour again. So, yep. Again, please no spoilers, hints, or clues, but I'm curious to know your thoughts down below. This is so fascinating, and I can't wait to know more. So, in the meantime, I hope y'all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care, and yeah, I'll be back very soon with more of 86.